Welcome back to Eject Media, the channel that dives into the odd, obscure, and unforgettable movies from the VHS era. Think of us as the back of the VHS box, giving you the scoop on every tape's story, the weird twists, the scares, and the moments that made these films unforgettable. Our shelves are stacked with movies that didn't always hit the mainstream, but earned a lasting place in the hearts of curious viewers. Tonight, we're unpacking a batch of 90s horror oddities. These aren't your typical blockbusters. They're the films that creep you out, make you squirm, or leave you nervously laughing at just how strange they got. From oversized parasites and anthology scares to relentless slashers and grotesque family dynamics, these are the tapes that dared to be different. So cue the VCR and let the static hum. And get ready for a lineup that proves the VHS era produced some of the weirdest, wildest, and most inventive horror films ever made. Dark Waters, 1993. On a remote island cloaked in fog and secrecy, Dark Waters unfolds like a gothic nightmare. Directed by Mariano Bino, the film follows Elizabeth, a young woman drawn to a convent after the death of her father. What seems like a place of refuge quickly reveals itself as something far more sinister. The nuns guard strange rituals, subterranean chambers, and a lurking presence that feels older than the convent itself. The movie is soaked in atmosphere. Candlelit corridors, crashing waves, and eerie chants create an overwhelming sense of dread. Instead of relying on jump scares, Bano leans into mood and suggestion, making the viewer feel constantly on edge, as though danger is always just beyond the frame. Elizabeth's journey becomes less about faith and more about survival, as she uncovers the convent's terrifying connection to an ancient evil. The closer she gets to the truth, the more surreal and dreamlike the film becomes, blurring the line between vision and reality. Dark Waters has been praised for its haunting imagery and Lovecraftian undertones, capturing that feeling of something vast, unknowable, and malignant pressing in on human lives. It's a film that crawls under your skin, not because of what it shows, but because of what it suggests. And once you've seen it, it's hard to shake the feeling that the island's secrets are still waiting, just beneath the surface. In the Mouth of Madness, 1994, reality bends and crumbles in John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, a 1994 descent into cosmic horror and madness. The story follows insurance investigator John Trent, played by Sam Neill, hired to track down missing horror novelist Sutter Kane. Kane's books are said to drive readers insane, and as Trent digs deeper, he realizes fiction and reality are beginning to merge. The film unfolds like a labyrinth. Small cracks in the world widen into gaping fissures, readers go mad, towns appear and vanish, and Kane's words seem to rewrite existence itself. Trent, skeptical at first, finds himself pulled into a world that refuses to obey logic. Carpenter builds the tension through surreal imagery and escalating paranoia, making the audience question every scene just as much as Trent does. In the Mouth of Madness is deeply indebted to Lovecraft's legacy of cosmic horror, where human understanding is dwarfed by forces too vast and alien to comprehend. But Carpenter adds his own flair. Dark humor, a relentless pace, and a willingness to push the nightmare to its breaking point. By the film's climax, Trent's grip on reality has fully unraveled, leaving the audience trapped in the same disorienting spiral. It's not just a horror story, it's a story about horror itself and the dangerous power of stories to reshape the world. In the Mouth of Madness is unsettling, imaginative, and one of Carpenter's most enduring cult classics. A film where the scariest part isn't the monsters, but the realization that you can no longer trust what's real. The Dark Half, 1993. Stephen King's fascination with the duality of identity takes center stage in The Dark Half, directed by George A. Romero in 1993. The story follows Thad Beaumont, a novelist who decides to retire his pseudonym, George Stark, a name he once used to publish pulpy crime novels. What seems like a symbolic gesture quickly turns sinister when Stark appears to come to life, stalking Thad and leaving a trail of brutal murders. The film thrives on its central theme, the idea that our darker impulses can't be so easily buried. Timothy Hutton delivers a strong performance in the dual roles of Thad and Stark, embodying both the weary family man and the violent alter ego that refuses to stay fictional. Romero leans into atmosphere and tension rather than nonstop gore, letting the horror seep in through suggestion, shadow, and paranoia. As the murders escalate, Thad must confront the possibility that Stark isn't just a creation of his imagination, but something born from within him, something alive. The psychological battle between author and alter ego becomes as terrifying as the physical violence that follows. The Dark Half isn't just a supernatural thriller, it's a meditation on creativity, identity, and the monsters we create, whether on the page or in ourselves. By the end, it leaves viewers questioning how much control anyone really has over the darkness they try to suppress. Brainscan, 1994. Brainscan, directed by John Flynn in 1994, is a techno-horror gem that captures both the thrill and danger of early virtual reality. The film follows Michael, a reclusive teenager obsessed with horror games, played by Edward Furlong. When he tries a mysterious new interactive game called Brainscan, he discovers that what happens inside the game has real-world consequences. At first, it feels like the ultimate rush, ultra-violent gameplay, with no rules, no limits, and no consequences. But Michael soon realizes the game is more than just entertainment. The murders he commits in virtual reality begin occurring in reality. And at the center of it all is Trickster, a sinister, flamboyant guide who pushes Michael further into the nightmare. The movie mixes slasher thrills with sci-fi paranoia, exploring the idea of technology blurring the line between fantasy and reality. The Trickster, with his bizarre charisma, embodies temptation itself, always urging Michael to go one step further, to give in to darker urges. Brainscan stands out as a strange, stylish time capsule of 90s culture. Cyberpunk aesthetics, VHS horror energy, and early anxieties about what immersive media could do to the human mind. It's campy, eerie, and oddly prophetic, suggesting that sometimes the real horror isn't what's on the screen, but what happens when the screen refuses to let you go. Cemetery Man, 1994. Cemetery Man, also known by its original title Delamore to Delamore, is one of the strangest and most stylish horror films of the 90s. Directed by Michel Soavi in 1994, it blends gothic atmosphere, surreal humor, and bursts of graphic horror into something that feels equal parts art film and midnight movie. Rupert Everett stars as Francesco Della Morte, the caretaker of a cemetery where the dead don't stay buried. Within 7 days, they rise again, and it's his job to put them back down, usually with a gunshot or a shovel to the head. His only companion is Nagi, a simple-minded assistant who says little but proves unexpectedly loyal. At first, it plays like a quirky zombie tale, but the film quickly becomes more surreal. Delamort falls in love with a mysterious widow who seems to die and return in different guises, each time reshaping his obsession. The boundaries between life and death blur, dreams and reality overlap, and the story drifts into territory that feels mythic, poetic, and deeply unsettling. The film is visually stunning, drenched in gothic imagery. Fog-draped graveyards, candlelit chambers, and decaying corpses that are equal parts grotesque and beautiful. Soavi uses these elements not just for scares, but to build a meditation on love, mortality, and the absurdity of existence. Cemetery Man is often described as one of the last great Italian horror films, carrying forward the legacy of directors like Dario Argento and Lucio Fulci while carving out its own unique identity. It's darkly funny, grotesque, and oddly romantic, leaving viewers unsure whether they've just watched a zombie film, a love story, or a surreal existential nightmare. More than a cult classic, it's a reminder of how wild and unpredictable the VHS era could get, where even a movie about re-killing the dead could transform into something haunting, absurd, and unforgettable. Night of the Scarecrow, 1995. Rural horror meets supernatural revenge in Night of the Scarecrow, directed by Jeff Burr in 1995. The story begins when a small town accidentally resurrects a vengeful spirit, bound to a scarecrow. What follows is a grisly series of attacks as the entity exacts revenge for past wrongs, turning the quiet community into a bloody battleground. The scarecrow itself is a striking figure, part monster, part avenger, lurking in cornfields and striking with brutal force. The film embraces classic horror tropes, pitchforks, barns, dark country roads, but infuses them with supernatural flair, making the villain more than just a man in a mask. Instead, the scarecrow feels elemental, a spirit tied to the land itself. As the killings escalate, the townspeople's buried secrets are dragged into the open, revealing that the scarecrow's wrath isn't random. Its justice twisted into something monstrous. The film's pacing keeps the tension high, mixing atmospheric dread with splashes of gory spectacle. Night of the Scarecrow may not have been a mainstream hit, but it has earned a place among cult horror fans who love its blend of rural Gothic mood and supernatural mayhem. At its best, it captures the primal fear of the fields at night. Silent, endless, and hiding something waiting to move just beyond the stalks. Ticks, 1993. Ticks, directed by Tony Randall in 1993, is a slimy creature-feature delight that takes the backwoods survival trope and injects it with grotesque body horror. The story follows a group of troubled teens sent to a wilderness retreat, only to discover the woods are crawling with oversized, mutated ticks. The culprit: illegal steroid experiments on marijuana crops that have turned the parasites into relentless predators. What makes Ticks so effective is its mix of camp and genuine nastiness. The practical effects are wonderfully disgusting. Oozing transformations, bursting skin, and crawling infestations that make your skin itch just watching. Each attack escalates the tension, but there's also a streak of dark humor, the film never taking itself entirely too seriously. It's a movie about survival, yes, but also about facing fears both external and internal. Each character is tested by the grotesque creatures, but also by their own insecurities and conflicts. For horror fans, though, the real star is the sheer creativity of the monster effects. Gooey, over-the-top, and unforgettable. Ticks is pure 90s VHS horror, gross, pulpy, and endlessly entertaining. It's the kind of movie you put on knowing it'll make you squirm and laugh in equal measure. Campfire Tales, 1997. Campfire Tales, directed by Matt Cooper, Martin Kunert, and David Semmel in 1997, is a horror anthology that taps into the timeless tradition of swapping scary stories by firelight. The framing device follows a group of friends, stranded after a car accident, who gather around a fire to tell each other tales. What unfolds is a mix of urban legends, supernatural encounters, and twisted morality plays. Each segment has its own tone, from eerie ghost stories to gruesome tales of betrayal, creating a patchwork of horror that feels like the 90s answer to classics like Creepshow. The anthology format lets the film keep a brisk pace, with each story delivering its own scares and surprises before moving on to the next. The real strength lies in its nostalgia. Campfire Tales feels like a cinematic version of those whispered urban myths we all grew up with. Stories about mysterious hitchhikers, unseen stalkers, and chilling coincidences. It leans on atmosphere as much as gore, creating an experience that's both fun and unsettling. For horror fans, it's a love letter to the stories that shaped our earliest fears. Campfire Tales may not reinvent the genre, but it captures the thrill of being scared with friends in the dark, where every sound in the woods feels like part of the story. Skinner, 1993. Skinner, directed by Ivan Nagy in 1993, dives into the disturbing psychology of its titular character, played by Ted Raimi. On the surface, Dennis Skinner seems like a mild, awkward man. But beneath that exterior lurks a violent predator who stalks and murders women, peeling away more than just their lives. The film is grim and confrontational, blending slasher conventions with uncomfortable psychological intensity. Raimi's performance is chilling. He plays Dennis with a mix of vulnerability and menace, making the character both pathetic and terrifying. Tracy Lords co-stars as one of his potential victims, bringing grit and strength to a role that grounds the otherwise unflinching brutality. What sets Skinner apart from more straightforward slashers is its willingness to lean into the disturbing rather than the sensational. The violence is grotesque, yes, but it's the character study that lingers. The sense of watching someone whose facade is always on the verge of cracking, revealing the horror beneath. Skinner isn't for the faint of heart, but it stands out as one of the more unsettling direct-to-video horrors of the 90s. It's raw, disturbing, and unforgettable, lingering like a stain long after it's over. Head of the Family, 1996. Head of the Family, directed by Charles Band in 1996, is a strange mix of horror, dark comedy, and B-movie absurdity. The story follows a scheming couple who stumble onto the Stackpole family, a clan of deformed siblings led by the grotesquely oversized head, Myron. Possessing advanced intelligence and telepathic powers, Myron manipulates his family and those unfortunate enough to cross their path. The film embraces its camp with glee, leaning into outrageous characters, exaggerated scenarios, and a tongue-in-cheek tone. While Myron is the focal point, a giant head with genius-level intellect, the other siblings contribute to the film's bizarre humor and unsettling atmosphere. It's part horror, part exploitation comedy, and fully aware of its own outrageousness. Instead of straight scares, Head of the Family entertains through its sheer weirdness, offering a grotesque spin on family dynamics and small-town scheming. As a full-moon production, it's exactly what fans expect. Cheap, trashy, and highly entertaining in its own way. Head of the Family is a reminder that horror doesn't always have to terrify. Sometimes it just needs to be outrageous enough to stick in your memory. That's a wrap on this collection of 90s horror oddities. From gooey creature features to creepy anthologies and low-budget madness, each film left its mark by being unapologetically strange. These tapes might have been overlooked when they were released, but they've found a home with fans who love the wild, the weird, and the wonderfully offbeat. If you enjoyed this dive into forgotten VHS-era treasures, be sure to like, subscribe, and share which film haunted you the most. Also, check out our online store at ejectmedia.etsy.com for even more VHS-era titles. And remember, always be kind and rewind, because every movie is someone's favorite.